Hello, happy Saturday. My name is Megan Mays. This is Being Civil in Minnesota. I come here on Saturdays to talk about issues involving family law and the court system in the state of Minnesota. I'm licensed to practice law and am a qualified mediator. This does not constitute legal advice, nor am I agreeing to be your attorney, but I like to come here to give some free information and resources because I think people should have access to what the rules are. Not necessarily a rule follower by trait, but being a lawyer, you have to know what the rules are. Today's topic I wanted to talk about was making a call to law enforcement when you have safety concerns and when you are experiencing domestic abuse. Many victims have given feedback, and the Minnesota rules require law enforcement agencies to have a domestic abuse arrest procedure. If the agency does not have one, then they use what is called the model policy, and that's under Minnesota Statute 629.342. It's a lovely little read here, and I thought I'd talk about what happens after a call goes to law enforcement. Now, this is not intended to be telling law enforcement how to do their job. This is just what the policy says. And so domestic abuse happens in many communities, many income levels, many diverse backgrounds. And it happens in your backyard. I live in Mankato, and I'm at a hotel for a soccer tournament. But in Mankato, we recently had a shooting, and you think, well, not my community, but that's why it's important to talk about domestic abuse. So this is based on Minnesota law and domestic abuse policy. So some of the background on the purpose of the policy is to enhance services provided to victims of domestic abuse. And so there was a movement to create a standardized model for to ensure that victims are provided the highest level of services. So if your law enforcement agency does not have a separate policy, then the domestic abuse model policy applies. So what happens first? There's a call to law enforcement. Maybe it's the victim, maybe it's a third party, maybe it's the perpetrator, the abusive individual that is contacting law enforcement, pretending to be the victim. It can be difficult for law enforcement sometimes to come on a scene and assess what's going on, but they have training for this. So report is received. They give these cases very high priority. And the model policy suggests that, says that law enforcement should send at least two law enforcement individuals to the location. And if there isn't one available, then they should try to locate one and send him or her or them as quickly as possible. Safety first. They're going to want to secure and ensure safety initially, and then separating the parties is a big part of that. Officers will typically separate the parties. This allows individuals to give statements in an environment where they would be less comfortable, perhaps disclosing some of those details in front of their abuser. So if there is an imminent danger of harm, law enforcement can force their way in to a location. I imagine a firearm, for example, might indicate that there is a high potential of lethality, or that the situation may become deadly for someone, and they may take action. Another really important thing is that if one of the parties or one of the individuals doesn't have English as their first language, it may be necessary to get an interpreter. Oftentimes, individuals who don't speak English can have difficulty in explaining domestic abuse to somebody who doesn't speak their same language. And it can make it so that anyone who does speak English may have an advantage in speaking with law enforcement. But law enforcement has training on this, so if there are children involved, law enforcement are mandated reporters. So if there's neglect, maltreatment, or unfortunately, if the abuse is against a child, law enforcement can and should report that information to child protection. What happens once a case gets to child protection is a completely different episode. But once that is indicated or found to be true by law enforcement, they are required to report that. There are instances where there are mandatory arrest policies, specifically when there's an order for protection or a harassment restraining order. If there's probable cause that domestic abuse has happened within the last 72 hours. And there is not the ability of law enforcement to issue a citation for domestic abuse in lieu of a arrest. Under the statute, order for protection, for example, it gives law enforcement the authority to arrest an individual without a warrant if they believe they've violated an order. And if the officer does take the individual into custody, that is allowed under statute. And even if the victim maybe requests that it doesn't happen, the model policy indicates that is what needs to happen. Law enforcement will also stay on scene to make sure that the danger has subsided. Law enforcement will also provide victims with resources and information, notice of their rights, information about how to apply for a restraining order, for example, and telephone numbers for domestic abuse agencies. The law enforcement officer must make a detailed report even if no arrest is made, and a copy of that needs to be provided to the victim, their attorney, or agencies designated by the OJP to be organizations providing domestic abuse services to victims. Law enforcement has a difficult job. They are trained and are to take into consideration the fact that there may be a primary aggressor and an individual who maybe reacted in a way to defend themselves. That would not be an appropriate situation where both parties should be arrested. And there is a policy against what's called dual arrests, meaning just arriving and saying, you're both going to jail. Oftentimes they will look at the history of the parties. They'll look at their criminal records. They will talk to the individuals and get the accounting of what happened. They'll talk with witnesses. So law enforcement's main objectives are to protect and provide accountability and connect victims to resources. Minnesota law requires and encourages an immediate response, probable cause arrest, and victim support. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse or experiencing safety concerns, please reach out to a domestic abuse agency or call the National Domestic Abuse Hotline. I know it was a heavy topic today. There's a lot going on in the world right now, so stay civil, stay safe, and I will see you next week. Take care.